All right, so we can get started. So good morning, welcome everybody to our Navigating College Admissions During COVID-19 webinar. My name is David Arosa and I am the president of Western Suffolk Counselors Association. And thank you all so much for being here. I cannot tell you all how happy I am to have you all here this morning. We have a wonderful program all set up. If you could just switch to the next screen, Suzanne, that would be excellent. So first of all, happy National School Counseling Week. I know that we are ending on a good note. And, I did actually decide to do a little bit of a selfie this morning, along with a little bit about what I feel school counselors are better together because, as that is the theme for this year's National School Counseling Week. And that's just a little bit of what I decided to do this morning about what I feel on how school counselors are better together. And for those of you that may not be speaking Spanish, the logo and the photograph that you see on your left, this is basically thanking all of you because all of you are definitely helping our students succeed. If we could just advance to the next screen. So first, I just wanted to make sure that everybody is introduced to our executive board. A lot of people are inside the room this morning. There are some people that are not with us today, but I just wanted you all to know that we are all here to serve all of you. And we have come up with many different type of programs for all of you for the rest of the season. If we could advance to the next screen, Suzanne. Now, without further ado, I would like to just make it very short and sweet and turn it over to our panelists. We are joined here by Suzanne Miller, Sarah Taiclet, Kate Anderson, and Robert Pertusati. You could stop share right now, Suzanne, and then we will bring that up later on. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and we will go over navigating college admissions during COVID-19. Welcome once again, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, good morning, everyone. I guess since my picture's first, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Suzanne Miller. Hello to everybody out there that I know, and how nice to meet you, those who I don't. I am the Long Island Admissions Counselor for SUNY Geneseo. I'm a regional counselor, so I live right here on Long Island. I live in Suffolk County, but I've been with Geneseo now for about 3.5 years. And I also have a very long and deep experience with college admissions in general. I've been in the field for about 25 years or so in a variety of positions. So yeah, this is a very unusual year. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we're happy to have a discussion about what we're seeing at our end. Kate or Sarah.
Oh, yes, I'll go next. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Taiclet. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions at SUNY Old Westbury. I've been with Old Westbury for about 16 years, maybe longer, I'm not sure. Prior to that, I was at SUNY Oneonta, my alma mater, for 8 years. So I have, 24 or so years of admissions experience. And I've been to many SUNY campuses and they're all fabulous. And I'm just really happy to be here today so we can have a nice discussion. I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm also working remote. I'm actually at a friend's house. I'm in Pennsylvania, so I'm not in my office. So if you hear a dog barking, that's Mika, and I'm just so happy to be here. See you all. Thank you.
I love all the surprise visitors. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Anderson. I am SUNY Oswego's Long Island Admissions Counselor. It is my second SUNY. I used to work at Geneseo, and before that I worked at 4 law schools. But like Suzanne, I guess really all of us, even if we aren't here right now, I live on Long Island, and look forward to this conversation because it's been a crazy almost 2 years.
Okay, so they tell me I'm Rob Pertusati from Stony Brook University, and I've been with Stony Brook, my goodness. I will be celebrating year 30 on May 6th here at the university, and this wasn't my first stop. I worked at Hofstra for about 6 years prior. So yes, 36 years in the business, and we've seen lots of changes, but no more so than in the last 2 years. And I think we all want to begin by saying thank you to all the counselors for everything that you do to support our young people, because without you, they would not have gotten through this. And you may not hear this often enough from folks in your camps, how important and how valuable you are in everyday sort of life for the students and for each other. And I think we have to remember that we're all in this together, and we're all working together as a team to help students reach their goals. And whatever role we play in that process, it's an important role. And we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the things that we've been seeing over the course of the last couple of years and how we've been sort of pivoting, right? That's one of the good COVID words that we've been using these last couple of years. And also where the future is heading, because there's still a lot of uncertainty, even though things are looking up, I'm hoping, I'm knocking on wood, but there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of, well, where does test optional go from here? How do students get involved in co-curricular life when opportunities are somewhat limited? What are the other facets of an application that will help us make the determination of appropriate fit in light of some information that may not be there, and or things have been changing? How do we refocus so that we can access information and help students tell their story? Because as you all know, that's what this is about. They're telling their story. There's an academic story, certainly, but there's also a personal story, a co-curricular story, and the outside things, and kind of helping them understand that there's value in that story, and it's important for them to be able to share that story. I don't know if my colleagues on the panel want to share any other thoughts before we actually start engaging in the conversation about some of those topics. Anyone before we start going? Like, no.
I think they're the right topics.
Okay, those are good topics. Thank you. So I think we'll start with probably the most obvious one, perhaps, that's been looming, and I think causing students probably a great deal of stress because they're confused. Who's test optional? Who's not test optional? If they are test optional, should I still submit my scores? What are good scores? Is it going to hurt me? What do I do? We've been hearing this for the last 2 years, and the panic in their voices and their emails, it's hard. It's hard. And again, we try to remind them that we're trying to get them to give us as much information that would be helpful in the process. So I think all of us on here, all 4 of us, we are all test optional at this point because we're SUNY, and SUNY dictates for us when we continue, and we are continuing slowly. Some schools are going test optional for longer periods of time. SUNY is taking a more research-based approach, so that we want to look to see how the decisions that have been made thus far are changed from years past when we had more test scores. So year by year, they're making an analysis to see, okay, are we comfortable moving forward? None of us work for the College Board, so we have no vested interest in whether or not we are or not test optional. It's what's best for the student and what will make the student successful on our campuses, because that's important. We don't want to admit students who are not going to be successful. It's certainly not fair to the student and certainly not to the institution. But I think something we hear a lot about is with this test optional, well, do schools really not look at my scores if I check off I'm test optional, and or should I send them, and what's a good score? And I think we have to remember, we try to tell students, we try to be as transparent as possible. You all know that, and we're preaching to the choir, we publish information, and SUNY certainly publishes information about our statistics in terms of where our middle 50% of the test takers fall for this past year's entering class. So we try to tell students, well, use it as a gauge, like, okay, if you fall within that range, then maybe you want to give some further thought to submitting your scores, and depending on where the range you fall. I always tell students, if you're not a good test taker, and hey, I wasn't, and I got admitted to Stony Brook and I did very well, but maybe this is not the time to submit your score. There are other things in your application that we will rely on more heavily to help us in our decisions. So I think that's the first thing that the students should start looking at on our websites, where if they've taken a test, and I tell students, if you have an opportunity to take a test, do it. You don't have to send the scores yet, but kind of get a sense of where you fall, because some students sell themselves short. They actually do better than they might think. So I always tell, take the test, see how you do, and then start looking at the comparisons. Kate, you want to add something?
I was just thinking, in some ways, I think it's just such a good change because I feel like it gives students more control of this process. We all know some really, really smart people who aren't good test takers. And I think they should look at it that way. But I'm seeing a lot of people who never took any tests, and I do think that most students should at least try them because it may help, especially when grades may have suffered through the pandemic. So I'd like to pitch it as them having a little bit more control. I was happy to see last week that SUNY announced that for this year's juniors will be test optional, because we didn't know, and that was the question we were getting. And so yes, for fall of 2023, SUNY will be test optional. So also in terms of press, isn't there a free app week coming up we should make sure everyone knows about? I know not all SUNYs are participating, but isn't it the 22nd to the 25th of this month? But I can't find a press release on it, so maybe.
Details have not come out yet for it. And what's a little different about this one is that students can use either the SUNY app or the Common App. That part I know, which is great. So if a student already has a completed Common App for other schools, they don't have to recreate the wheel. So that is, but yeah, I think that details are coming. Details are coming
Stay
about
tuned.
that. And we actually at Geneseo, we actually extended our deadline. Our deadline was February 1st, but because of this upcoming free week, we've extended our deadline to March 1st. So if you have any students out there, anybody can apply and still have an on-time application. But just to add a little bit to this test optional discussion, a couple things at play, and I think a lot of you are aware of this, but I certainly want to point this out. If you're looking at averages from last year we were something like 75 to more % of colleges across the country were test optional. So of course our averages are going to be higher because only students who submitted scores are in that mix. So if a student had scores far below, they're not going to be submitting the scores. So be mindful, and I've seen this trend, and we've all seen this trend over the past 15, 20 years since test optional has really kind of, it picked up a lot of traction in the past, maybe 5 to 10, colleges that might not have seemed as selective seem to have really high averages. It's because they've been test optional for so long. So only students who have strong scores have been sending them. So take that with a grain of salt. But as I meet with students, I always say, hey, reach out to me when you're about to submit your application. And let's have a discussion about your scores. I'm not going to write down your score and put it in your file, but I'm more than willing to have a conversation with a student about whether or not to submit. What I love about test optional is that not only does it give that extra element of, letting the grades shine if they're what really is showing what the student's ability is, it also releases the time, effort, and money of test prep. Use that time, encourage your students to use that time in a more productive way, focusing on their grades, focusing on their whatever outside interests they have. If any of you folks in the room are, your livelihood is test prep, I apologize, but let's help them focus on positive things that they can do to enhance their themselves as individuals and their applications.
I'll jump in now. My turn to talk. I agree with everything my colleagues have said, and I want to add to that. The test optional thing for me, I'm thrilled because I feel like sometimes that will just, we don't have to use it if it's going to hurt an applicant, but sometimes it does help. And I do agree with, taking the test anyway in some cases, but not, stressing out about it. If nothing else, for the practice of taking a standardized test, to have that, that practice and stuff. But, like Suzanne said, we would love to have a conversation with a student or a parent to determine should they submit the test score or not. For, if they're concerned, like, oh, should I, will it hurt me or will it help me? I know at Old Westbury, we are always looking for a way to help them meet the admission requirements. We're not looking to say, oh, well, your SAT scores are horrible, so now we're going to deny you with this test optional. So having a conversation about it is, we're always eager to do so and make ourselves available. But sometimes I've noticed that, looking at it holistically and not having to worry about those SAT scores, if you really analyze their transcript, especially with COVID, and that's kind of what this discussion is about, you'll see, strong classes, strong subjects, but maybe one really bad, year in one subject really brought them down. But other than that, they're doing very well. So we don't want to necessarily have to hold that against them either. It's not just a GPA. So, I was reviewing students, recently that we were going to put, on our wait list or possible denials, or, and I really analyzed them. Like they were already analyzed again, but I went back and I I read all the essays really carefully. Those letters of reference that high school counselors write and teachers write, I was looking for ways to explain why maybe they would be a fantastic candidate, but maybe their grades were just not quite there. And I found, especially with COVID, I found a lot. I found a lot of, let me just like really analyze that again and take a look. Because there have been some, special circumstances that the student may not tell us themselves. They'll put something in an essay, but not all the time. There might be something that stands out that I learned from the counselor, the high school counselor's letter of recommendation. And sometimes I'll get a phone call or I'll be at an onsite and a counselor will pull me aside and say, listen, this student isn't going to tell you this, but, and then they tell me this family situation and this and that, and I'm just compelled to see what we can do. Yes, we don't want to accept anyone who's going to come and fail, but I don't see that as, a possibility if they just need a little extra. I met with a student the other day at a high school and she didn't apply for the EOP program. She would have been denied for regular admission. But then I started asking a few more questions about, she told me she was living with family members. There was like 8 or 10 people in the house and, parents weren't involved. And I said, you know what? You might be a candidate for the EOP program, and explained what it was and about the financial qualifications. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to get her in through that way, and she'll get the support services that, she needs and would benefit from, but she may not have even been aware that she had that. And I know high school counselors are always informing students of that, but sometimes having that extra conversation or just digging a little deeper is just very powerful. So I want to thank all the counselors on this call, because I know what advocates you are for your students. And I'm sure I can speak for my colleagues that we want to talk to you. If you have someone you want to discuss, we're available for you, because we want to help the students get enrolled in a college that's a good fit for them, that, they'll succeed, be successful, and be the best person that they can be.
I just want to add one last thing on my side about the test option. I think this is important because I think there's a lot of misconceptions of what it means. Even within SUNY, it's general admission, test optional. There are some exceptions to some programs within there, and that's gotten a lot of anxiety for some of our students. Some of our honors programs, particularly our Scholars for Medicine program, which I know you all send students to. Thank you. Our joint combined early assurance program. The School of Medicine requires, in that case, that they do submit scores. So just be very careful with students when they come in panic. But I thought they were test optional, and it's yes, an overarching test optional for general admission does not necessarily mean that it's test optional for every program within every school. So that's just something that I think some students are struggling with. What do you mean exceptions? It's kind of hard. It's not a one size fits all.
I was thinking the same thing, Robin. Also, I think it's different at different schools. Some schools can't unsee a score that was submitted, and other people can look the other way if it's not a good score. And so it sort of does add some complexity in that students have to, on that spreadsheet of the schools that they're applying to, and how am I applying, and what are the deadlines, and how many letters of recommendations, I think you have to understand the test policy. So it does lead to some deeper questions, I think, in that regard. So I'm curious what all of us, like what our schools do. We will only do what helps the student at Oswego. I had a great application the other day that had a 910, and I just did not see that 910 because the grades were good and the student was invisible.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
One other thing about tests, I do think one thing that I feel is different, they couldn't sign up for SATs and ACTs. And so it's great that we went test optional. I think this is basically a really good change. Of course, they didn't also take a lot of regents. And Sarah, when you mentioned someone doing poorly in one course, a lot of times I would then look at the regents and say, well, okay, they didn't do well, but they pulled it together at the end and did well on that region. So I am missing, even though, it's not a major chunk of the pie, but in a holistic review, I would see that. And, there's just these big gaps, or in the city of 2 years of students who have letters, no numbers at all, right? And that's kind of makes it a little harder. So Suzanne, what were you going to say?
Yeah, we do see this. If a student self-reports, we'll see it no matter what they say. I know that on the Common App, colleges can set up their own way of viewing that. If a student says that they are test optional, those scores will be suppressed. We don't have that set up, so we will see it. But yeah, same thing. We will do what helps the student. If a student says they don't want the scores considered, I might go, oh, but they said no. Okay, let's look at everything else. But you're right about the lack of Regents exams and the, some schools with pass fail. And I'm actually reading a lot. Not only am I reading a lot of Long Island, all Long Island, but I'm also reading a lot of New York City transcripts. And oh, you could have a whole webinar about that interpretation as well. So we are digging for information. To if there's a student that had very strong 9th and 10th and then tanked in 11th, or really not so great 9th and 10th, but a great 11th. I'm seeing that I'm asking for mid-year grades far more often this year than I ever have. So I guess I see my colleagues nodding. Yeah. Because wow, this has been wonky. And we get it that these kids, these seniors, the last normal high school year for them was 9th grade.
Yeah, a lot of us have kids of our own. I have a 12-year-old, I have a 9-year-old. I mean, this is, coming into year 3, they're wearing masks at school, and, we get it. We work on a college campus, we see the challenges. And, we remember, we didn't have to go through that. And so I think we appreciate knowing what they've missed. And so, when reviewing a transcript, they only have like 2 or 3 Regents to show. It's, and especially if they weren't recent, or, we at Old Westbury, we look for ways to work with them so we can admit them. Again, not to put them in, an ocean when they should be in a pool. But it's hard to hold something against someone that was, a couple of years ago, and the change in a person, in a high schooler from 9th grade to 11th grade to 12th grade. I mean, it's astronomical, exponential, whichever one of those words fits better. And same with college, you see the freshmen come, Rob's laughing at me. You see the freshmen come in and they're, and then by the time they're a senior and you follow them, it's a beautiful process. It's a beautiful experience to watch them and to be able to help them and mentor them. So we really appreciate what the school counselors do. And on the college level, we do that too. I'm not, in student affairs, but we have student ambassadors. Old Westbury is like kind of a smaller campus. It's not, a zillion people there, but it's a tight knit campus, and, people get to know each other. We watch these students develop and they help each other. So it's just, beautiful process to watch, but we don't want to hold something against them that just, so I'm just going to say it sucked, for everyone. Like a couple of years of high school, it's like wearing a mask, like whatever, you can't whisper in class anymore. You can't like those lines of communications that we took for granted, they missed out on. So we're very conscious of that.
I think to be mindful of time, I know we've been talking a lot about test optional, but the theme that we're hearing is digging deeper for information, telling the story, giving us information to help make the right and best decision. So the more that we can help our students have faith and confidence that giving that information to us is going to be helpful in the decision process, I think that's a theme that we're going to try to share, because it's a trust issue, certainly. And I think the anxiety of this process has made it even worse. But I think it's, at the end of the day, it's the more information that they can share with us, the better we are all positioned to make the best decisions. And I started hearing things about, the recommendations and the essays. I know, Sarah, you were talking a little bit about that as well. So I think maybe we can I'm just going to pitch this out there and let the panel sort of discuss this. The importance of the essay and the recommendations being more so important, and not that they weren't before, but ever so more, because they're the story. You can't change. I don't think you can change a transcript, hopefully not. And test score is what it is, but here's where folks can be proactive in students telling their story through the essay, and the recommenders, the counselor statement, the teacher recs, the employer recommendation, whatever, help telling the story through the lens of an objective eye. So your thoughts, folks, on these particular areas, the essay and recommendation, I think would be helpful for the group to hear.
I have quite a few, and I'll try to keep it brief. One thing I find extraordinarily helpful, if it's not clear in the student's writing, is what was the home situation for these students during pandemic. I've learned a lot about, through the essays, through the letters, about students who live in very cramped quarters with large families, who these students do not have a dedicated device that belongs to them. They have to share laptops with siblings. They have to share Wi-Fi that's already spotty. So there are reasons why their grades might have really slipped over the past year and a half. That's incredibly valuable information. So rather than, sometimes I'm getting letters from counselors saying, it's too bad I have not been able to get to know the student because of this situation, so I'm not sending in an evaluation. Even if you just give us that piece of information, that sheds some light. I have seen the past few years, with the stigma of mental health kind of going away, we've seen a lot of students disclosing mental health difficulties in their essays. And that's great that they feel confident and comfortable sharing that. But I've seen so many more this year, so many more. And some of them are, and I conclude with, I'm getting help, I'm feeling better, but some of them are not. Some of them are just, I don't know where these students are and if they're going to be safe on my campus. Some of them have been very, very severe. So I don't know how much information you're allowed to share. If you can consult with the students who are really suffering, if you even know. That has been a hot issue this year as well. And I've also seen a very large uptick in students who are not filling out the activities section at all, or maybe one or two things. And then the letters, thankfully, list a lot of the activities that the students are involved in, because without the test scores, we need more. We need more information. So the letters, I would like to know more about the resilience, the home situation, and the students' reactions to setbacks, and if there's any permission to share how these students are doing emotionally, that would be very helpful.
Suzanne, you bring up a great point. Getting more detailed information that's the student is okay with sharing. It is confidential what we receive. We're not calling up the kid's friends and saying, hey, I know about, it's like, it's in the vault, if anyone gets that. We review it. We're very thoughtful about the process. We think, can our campus, do we have support that might be able to help the student? Would they be a good EOP applicant? Would they just not thrive on our campus? Is it, or what are they, we can get a lot from information that we know how to kind of disseminate and apply it to our campus that may not be obvious to the student. And I think also when it comes to students that may be, borderline, they really should write that essay. Sometimes I see students, they apply early action, but there's no supplemental essay, there's no letters of reference. And I understand sometimes they can't get that, but I do see a handful. I'm guessing they haven't even requested it, or they haven't even thought to send it. And if there's a borderline student and we only have a certain number of openings, I'm gonna send it to someone who at least wrote the essay. It's like to give someone a shot, because I have more information, more holistic view. So, we ask for one letter of recommendation. It's we like it. We've accepted and denied students without it, but it's really helpful, especially for those borderline situations. At least make the effort of completing your application and going the extra mile. because we can't accept everyone, we can't deny everyone, but write the essay. And sometimes I know with the Common App, the essay kind of has to go in that form, but they can send a supplemental essay, they can send additional information. If a student makes a phone call or sends me an email, I make a note of that. And that is all something that I find to be really helpful, to actually have a back and forth and talk to the student. If a parent, contacts us, I'll speak to the parent. I prefer to speak with the student though. It's something I've felt for, the last 24 years. Like I started out as a young professional, being a fresh college graduate, working in admissions after being an orientation leader in my Oneonta days. And now I'm like old enough to, to be the parent of these kids that are going to college and, grandparents soon, you know what I mean? It's just like, I see, I've been working with the same population, the same age population for a number of years. And what I have found is the students that advocate for themselves tend to be very successful, and they may not know what to say on the phone, but just for them to call, like we can lead them through a conversation. We've been doing this forever. We know the questions to ask, but for them to have the wherewithal to fend for themselves, if you will, they're going to have to do that once they go to college. So by them starting now and having that confidence, and sometimes, I know as a parent, I have to kind of force my kid, like, what, when at a restaurant, oh, if you need more napkins, I said, go ask. And, my son will be like, and my daughter will be like, may we have some more napkins for the like, she'll get up, she'd probably go behind the thing and like bring a tray of drinks. Like every different. Rob knows my kids, he's laughing, but just, not everyone's has that wherewithal, within them, that confidence to say, what, I can call a stranger that I don't know that works for a college and have a conversation. And so I would encourage high school counselors, middle school counselors, everyone on the call, to let the student know that they should be advocating for themselves in these situations. We don't bite, not that hard. We want to have the communication with the student. It opens doors for them. So once they're
Sarah, can I
have financial questions. Yes, who's talking? Kate.
No,
Get it?
I wonder if anyone else has had this experience. This has happened more this year than any other year. We try to address students in emails using their preferred name. And so many times I'm getting these emails back that say, why did you send this email to me, but use my mother's first name? And do you know what it is? The parents have filled out the application. And then when it says preferred name, they put their own name on. I've been on the phone with, and the mother said, well, when I was writing the essay, and I'm thinking, oh no, we have a kind of, the Long Island parents can be really involved, which is a great thing. But of course, we do want the students to do it as much as possible. But I just have found, has happened 3 or 4 times this year, that the mother's first name was instead. So that was sort of funny. I agree about the essay. For me, when you see, they can write about whatever they want, but tragically, I didn't think I could see more essays about anxiety and depression. Certainly we are. And that is rough. I agree with Suzanne, they should write about whatever they want. When there is something glaring on the transcript, I feel like there's this elephant in the room. And if I don't see anything about that, they're writing about the big game when they tanked in 11th grade. So use those additional spaces, the COVID section or the additional information. They are underutilizing those spaces. They don't have to be long, but if grades are an issue, address it somewhere, because they're going to college, right? So the grades are important. And if we understand the context and what was going on or what their home life was, we're not going to hold it against them. But if I don't have that, if we've all said, if we don't have that information, then it's really hard. So I think that's something to think about. For the letters, I don't know a college that isn't okay with your recommendation letters being a list. It takes a lot of time. This is really hard. We know their grades, we know we're looking for those anecdotes you can tell us, that background information, whatever you can share that helps us, because even if you don't know them as well as you did a couple of years ago, you probably know these students better than we do and can share something. So I just feel like I've had a lot of counselors say to me, really, you're okay if my letter of recommendation is, more bulleted than, but am I right? Does anyone?
Kate, I prefer a bulleted list. let's be real, we read thousands of recommendation letters. We're not spending 10 minutes on each one, we're scanning. And when you do it for so long, we can do it very quickly, but we're just, information will pop out to us. So keep it concise, keep it real. Don't start with, hi, my name is Sarah Taiclet, and I'd like to write a letter of recommendation for Suzanne Miller, because the processor might file that under Sarah Taiclet, and not the student's name. So, just, it's okay to have a heading, letter of recommendation for Suzanne Miller, this and, the name, the student's name is the most important as far as getting it. And most things happen, things get filed away better now, like more automatically than in our days past with paper. But yeah, concise, you're able to draw information out that the student may not even know to give. So, even if you don't know the student that well, you can get information out of them. Okay, so what are your activities, this and that, and you're putting it into a format that is communicating to us. So you don't have to know them that well to be able to write, you might not say, well, I give my highest recommendation to Kate Anderson because this and that, and then to find out you don't know her. Just say, I'm providing information while I may not have had personal contact with the student, after discussions, and then give us give us bullet points. Bullet points are great. We're good with that.
I do want to address a question that was sent to me in the chat. It was not sent to the whole group. The question is, we often encourage students to disclose their mental health concerns and be open and brave if comfortable. I understand some may flag as a concern for safety, but this makes me question if we should encourage students to self-disclose, as it may impact their admissions decision. We do want to know, especially if it can explain the gaps in the transcript or peaks and valleys in the transcript. When I get concerned, when I was talking about, oh gosh, I'm talking about, I read an essay this year about from a student who was very frank and honest about his suicidal ideation, his opioid use. It was really graphic. It was really graphic. And first of all, heartbreaking. I couldn't wait to find out, is he getting the help? And he did mention that he was at the end that, he finally talked to his mom and he was getting the help, and et cetera, et cetera. That's the kind of stuff that might be bordering on the too much information. So use your judgment.
I read the same one.
I bet you did. I bet you did, Kate. I almost emailed you and said, but of course, confidential. We're not about to share names. But yeah, that really worried me. And we're mandated reporters. So when we see something, when I read about sexual abuse or something else, it does have to, it does get flagged. That's okay. We check in with all of our students, but of course you want to check in first with the students who you have the greatest concerns about. There are times I think, should they be 5.5 hours away from home? So, there's some rules about the essays, right? That you don't let someone else have the last word, don't repeat the prompt, all these stay within the word limit. But I think one of them is try to be sort of upbeat and positive, show you learn something. If you're writing about this, don't leave us with deep concerns about whether it's wise to let someone come to our campus. I think you have to feel that there's progress. And if the student is still in that deep valley, then maybe it is better to write about something else. It was interesting. I was at a workshop at Oceanside, and one of the English teachers made this point that she felt that students wrote about it so much because they actually don't do that much personal writing. And then when they start to write, it's really cathartic and it comes out. So I think it's a very healthy thing to be addressing any issues. Bit of a judgment call about whether that, if it's really dark, if it's really lacks hope, whether that's the best thing to send in the essay. That's my feeling. Yeah,
it's about balance. It's truly balance. But I think, and this is really even before COVID, because we try to tell students that the importance of telling your story is there. But at the same time, there was a sentiment a few years ago that students thought to catch our attention, they had to shock us. whether it was real or not real, the more shocking the story was that they thought, and I talked to many students, and I've had some essays in my 36-year career that were borderline graphic and pornographic, actually, where they were saying things that were just inappropriate. So there's a balance of telling your story if it's who you are and it's your voice and it's real and it's going to help in the process. At the same time, even with, it's not just the essay and recommendations, it's in a social media post. Everything should be about, remember who the audience is, and you think this person might be offended by something that you say to the extent that it will be harmful in the process. And this goes for life in general. It's not just college admissions, but young people today don't always understand that what they say, regardless of the context in which they say it, may come back to haunt them in the end. So it's like, it's that balance, and how do you help them find that balance? And it's not your job necessarily, it's not our job, I guess it's society's job to do that. And I think one thing that's still true is whatever they're doing, in whether they're asking folks to write letters of recommendation for them, whether they're writing their essay, they should arm these folks with the tools. So that I always talk about the college admissions process is like a tapestry. They're telling their story, and all these pieces of the tapestry have to sort of fit in. They have to sort of be woven together, so that when we're reading pieces of the application, it all makes sense. So I'm looking at a transcript that says I'm the best student on earth with these wonderful grades, and then I'm reading a recommendation from a teacher which says this student really struggled academically. So those things are not in sync. So we try to help students tell their story, pick recommenders who they feel confident can write letters for them. Your letters are certainly extremely valuable in terms of providing a context. But we can't forget about teacher recommendations. I know you all work very hard to help coach teachers to how to write effective letters, but even the employers, all these kinds of recommendations should be sort of in that same weave, so that if the student is going to ask someone, they're going to give them a copy of their essay, maybe their resume or their activities report, so that all the stuff makes sense. And whether it's COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, that's still going to be the same. It's the story that should be consistent. Sorry, I didn't mean, I was gonna, I'm a senior. I forget. If I don't say it, I forget.
Rob, that was very good. I wanted to just jump in one thing about those essays. When you talked about, content, appropriate, know your audience and stuff. I have found, I don't know if my colleagues have found this, there are a handful of folks are sending in essays like a text, and that's really not okay. It's not right. I don't recommend it. Lowercase I, the punctuation is completely off. They misspell the name of the school, like my school. It's like, yeah, really. And I know sometimes students don't have access to other people, but just most people do have access, at least during school, to like a basic spell check. I mean, you can do that right on, a Microsoft Word thing, have someone, maybe, especially someone you might be worried about, offer to review their essay first. Sometimes, most of the time they're regular essays, they're great, they're interesting, but it's very hard for me to see, like, if they're going to be prepared for college level English and they can't know to put a period after a sentence and like two spaces or capitalized I, and then if there's like, cursing in there. And I've seen things, it's like, I've literally seen people put in like the F word and stuff in a college essay, or if they're like referring to what someone said and quotes like the whole thing. And I'm just like, come on, it's not true confession time. It's not this or that. It's you're advocating for your own self. That should be something that should be proofed. And so any contact you have with students, I know you do workshops at times, to help them, and just let them know, punctuation is important. Spelling the name of the school correctly. It's, I get like Sunny, Old, West, and then totally spelled wrong. I'm like, and I know sometimes English isn't a first language, and I get that, but, again, a basic spell check, and just, making sure that they're able to do that would be important. We have something going on in the chat. That's just my advice, because if,
No, it's very good. I always say proofread, don't spell check, because proofreading, spell check will not make Ruth Bader Ginsburg's middle name correct.
That was one of mine. That was one of mine. Oh, and trust me, I take screenshots of mistakes in applications. And I say, I have a whole file, and I run a whole webinar through, through Geneseo called Application Do's and Don'ts. It's really well attended. I run it many, many times throughout the course of the application process. And it is, Kate's putting in her favorite typos. I've got some really great screenshots, and I don't mean to shame students. I mean, I do.
You know what, almost Suzanne, right? I mean, it adds a moment of levity to a busy day with reading a lot of words. But sometimes I almost feel when I see I agree, Sarah, I hate the lowercase I mean, this is supposed to be, college level writing, but when you see one mistake, you almost know at least it was the student and not that they hired someone to do it. I always talk about my friend giving me an essay, and I could just tell they'd hired someone because it talked about the student was horsing around with his friends. And only my dad, who was in his 90s at the time, would use that expression, right? So Rob, you said it, right? This is the student's voice. We want to hear from their story, their voice.
A great question just popped up about, students whose language is not English, whose first language is not English. Would you prefer their essays to be 100% edited, or does it make sense for you to see where they are? I would maybe help them with the basics, but let their voice shine through, because we also don't want to bring them in, set them up for failure. We want to make sure that they are that they're in an appropriate place. And let me tell you, some of those stories, they are the stories of resilience, the stories of triumph, or the stories of the peaks and valleys. They're incredibly compelling and really help with the big picture. So try to have as light a hand as possible in those essays, because they're, when I read those essays and then my son complains that one of his AirPods isn't working correctly and how frustrated he is, it really puts things in perspective for you, doesn't it?
Big time. I agree completely. Yes, you want them to have an edited essay, but just basic editing. We're not looking for perfection. We want it to be written by the student, but there's just some glaring, repetitive things. And that, if they're handing in something at school, you would think that they would check it if it was important to them. The college application, the essay, it's not a timed test. So they should be able to look at it, have it read by someone else, maybe make a couple of changes. It's not like they're taking the SAT and a 3-hour test with proctors and they can't do anything. So the effort should be made, especially if they're borderline grades, because it's supposed to be something important to them.
We just got the 5-minute warning bell from David. So I know we have one more topic we wanted to sort of touch on very briefly in terms of co-curricular activities. I know this past couple of years has been tricky for folks to have access to a lot of those kinds of experiences. So maybe we can give some little advice on things that folks can do perhaps in these times that still would be considered meaningful. And students may not think in their mind that it's meaningful, but as readers, we do. So I was thinking about transitioning to that. I think good minds.
Maybe we can put it best when we say that we are interested in how students spend their time, right? We all have a certain amount of time. We know that they're in school a whole lot of that time. One of the things that happens, sometimes students don't include things they do outside of school or their home responsibilities. Although it's funny, this year we've started to see people writing about like that they unload the dishwasher, and I think like, oh, do you brush your teeth too? Like that's not being able to be in clubs because you have to get your younger siblings off the bus every single day. But so we are interested in how they use their time, and job, sports, activities, whatever it is. I think COVID really caused a lot of confusion because students had these great things planned and they were really upset, but there's no reason not to tell us what you were going to do, that you had this lined up. We're really just, you had it, but couldn't. And then what did you do? So it's interesting to see the inner resources that some students, if everyone was stuck at home, what did they do? So the students who, I've read about students, building a computer, walking their elderly neighbor's dog, learning another language on Duolingo. you know, something that showed like some real, like that's creative, right? They took lemons and made lemonade in a way, if you will. So that's a quick thought.
Yep, I agree 100%. And especially I had a conversation with a student who had presented at a science fair in 9th grade. And she said, is it going to look really bad that I didn't present at the science fair in 10th and 11th grade also? I mean, they didn't have it because of COVID. I said, it's not going to look bad. Just put in the description that's why you didn't present in future years. You know, let us know what you would have been doing. And yeah, if you learned a new skill, learned how to play the ukulele by watching YouTube videos, learned how to, you know, bake croissants from scratch. We all had to be, you know, creative to fill our time, but also know if they spent quarantine binging on Netflix, playing online video games with their friends, it's okay. Kate, you're funny. She just direct messaged making sourdough bread. Kate gave me her starter and I've been making sourdough bread. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
I want in on.
No, you got it. So it's okay. You know, we were all just trying to survive. So they don't have to have, you know, created something out of nothing, but if they did, let us know.
And don't forget that pre, during, and post-COVID, work is also a co-curricular activity. So if they are helping with the family business, they have a newspaper route, whatever they're doing, they don't have to be the captain of the lacrosse team, the president of student council. They don't have to be saving the world necessarily, but right, the theme is what I'm hearing, doing something. What in their mind, it's small, but it's not. It's impactful. It's truthful. It's your story. It's what you're doing, how you manage your time beyond the classroom. So I think that's an important key to try to get that message across to students that their stories are important. They're all unique, and we want to learn about those unique stories as we are shaping our classes. So David, I think we'll turn it back over to you because I know you're giving us the final warning. I see it in your eyes.
That might also just be my excitement for the fact that it is quiet in my home right now. All the kids are at school, right? But well, first of all, I just want to thank our wonderful panelists for sharing their wisdom on how challenging it has been for not only just, you know, all of you as school counselors, but also your students. And hopefully you're able to walk away and bring some helpful ideas to not only just the high school staff, but then I know somebody made a comment about how start as early as you can. It is true. Middle school also makes a huge difference. And I cannot tell you how many times I've even sat in on middle schools whenever I was doing undergraduate work and speaking to those students about how it sometimes even starts there for all of them, about how they need to think about this. But on that note also, I just want to say that, believe it or not, this even continues with my current work as a medical school admissions professional. I've been doing this for about a decade, and I'm still coaching 40-year-old students on the fact that they need to also take advantage of these different types of things and be resilient on how they could show that they are ready for medical school. So it's still carrying over into the adulthood on top of high school students. So it's nothing new. I'm just now, I think I actually do have share screen abilities. So I'm going to bring my screen back up. And Suzanne, thank you so much for doing this for me earlier. Let me just go to slideshow. So I just want to, first of all, encourage all of you to donate towards our 2022 scholarship. Just so you all know, the scholarship applications for Western Suffolk will be going out to the current members very soon. So please do look out for all of that. Everything is going to be electronic. So we're very excited about this. But if you would like to donate in advance, we greatly do appreciate it. You can also check the email that I sent all of you yesterday.
So I'll just quickly just give a little bit more about the scholarship. I was chair of the scholarship committee for a number of years. I think Dexter Ward is gonna, we're gonna co-chair something this year, but the WSCA scholarship is a really wonderful program. We don't have millions of dollars in monies for scholarships, but we have several $100s and we take donations, and the donations go directly to scholarship recipients. If you're a high school counselor, you're eligible to nominate, student as per the application, and you can help them with it. And it is just a wonderful experience to be able to give back to the high school students, especially students that have, not just high achieving, but that they have helped others, finding a way to help others. We always like to reward that aspect of it. So please, if you have any way of donating, we would really appreciate it. You can Venmo, send a check. That's it on that. Dave.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So on that note, also, we do have some open positions with our executive council. I know that throughout the week, I was sending multiple emails, and one of them was about, first of all, upcoming executive board positions that are up for voting. But then also we have open executive council positions. And if you do have any questions about the time commitment, which it's really not that bad as you think, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I do encourage all of you to follow us on social media. We do have an Instagram account, our website, and also a Facebook account, as you will find some wonderful things that are posted up there very often. And thank you so much, Melissa Solomon from COPEG, for being our social media person. Much appreciated. And I want to leave you all with this because it's interesting. I found this photograph. It made me think of ninjas because my son and I were watching one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies the other day. And I thought to myself, you as school counselors, we should be multitasking ninjas. But of course, that's not a real title. I can't see a school district ever coming up with that on a budget. But I want to leave with all of you that you all are wonderful multitaskers. Thank you all so much for all you do. Please know that a certificate of attendance will be shared with all of you as early as next week, probably Monday morning. And this recording will immediately go up on our YouTube page following this event as it was recorded. So please share it with all your colleagues. Thank you all so much for being here. And I wish you all a good Friday and an even better weekend. And enjoy your winter break, which will be coming up very soon. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.